Okay, let's look at a simple example of how we can think about the concept of value and how it relates to consumer surplus. Now, when students move to university, there's obviously a whole bunch of things they need to think about. According to this article in The Independent, on the list of 50 essential things that every student should take with them, number 36 is an umbrella. So we're going to use that as our starting point to say that most students have a need satisfied by an umbrella. There's different types of umbrella. Let's say we want one that meets the following characteristics. We want it to be water repellent, we want it to be reasonably strong, we want it to be portable, and also maybe we want some different design options. So we have different needs other than simply staying dry, and they're satisfied with these criteria. This looks like a good option. So this is a screenshot from Amazon, and you can see here a particular type of umbrella that seems to meet all of those criteria that we've set out. As you can see, it comes in different types, and you can even imagine which of these designs is your favorite and then use that for the example that we're going to do. Maybe you like the polka dot one, the yellow one, the sky one, or the sunflower one. Question though is, what is your willingness to pay for one of these umbrellas? So you can think of the product that I've shown you, and I would like you to just reflect to yourself, what's your willingness to pay for one of these umbrellas? In other words, what is the value of this product for you? Now, if I reveal what the market price is, then at the time in which this study was done, it was selling on Amazon for £8.49. So that market price of £8.49 is going to be interesting because it will tell us whether or not you think that this is a purchase worth making. If you calculate the difference between the price that you're willing to pay and the market price, then we can just ascertain whether or not you would like to buy it, whether or not it's too expensive. And if you are willing to buy it, how much additional surplus you get over and above the value that the umbrella is creating for you. We can plot this if we have on our y-axis people's willingness to pay. So that's how much you can think of as being the amount that you decided you'd be willing to pay. And then the number of umbrellas. Now for an individual, this is the relationship between the price of umbrella and how many umbrellas you're willing to buy. Presumably few of you are in the market for multiple umbrellas, and if I told you that it was very, very cheap, you wouldn't buy lots of them. But if we're looking at this from the marketplace, if we have a classroom of 30, 40 students, then we'd see a nice relationship here between how many students are willing to buy an umbrella at various different price combinations. Now we'd expect that demand curve to be downward sloping because the lower the price, the more umbrellas people will be willing to pay for. Our willingness to pay for an umbrella is going to be higher for the first umbrella than for subsequent umbrellas. So diminishing marginal utility is why demand curves slope downwards, and that demonstrates that as the price falls, the market as a whole will be willing to buy more. The market price, as we saw, was £8.49. So at that market price, there will be a certain number of students within a classroom who would be willing to buy. And that gives us our quantity demanded in this marketplace. If you said that it was worth less than £8.49, then obviously you wouldn't buy. If you were willing to pay more than £8.49 though, then you would be willing to buy that umbrella and you would be gaining some consumer surplus. This added value, the difference between your willingness to pay and the market price. We have the number of transactions here, which is across the entire marketplace. And just notice this leads to this nice triangle area, which is the difference between how much people are willing to pay and the price that they have to pay. It is the triangle that's above the price line and below the demand curve. We call this consumer surplus. The umbrella is a nice example because it will definitely provide some consumer surplus for some of the people in the classroom. So some individuals will gain consumer surplus and the market as a whole will create consumer surplus. I do like to think of this concept of consumer surplus at an individual level though. So if you did generate some consumer surplus from this exercise, that's great. But I'd also like you to think of some other goods and services. In fact, whenever you engage in an economic transaction, The implication is that you're only making the purchase because it's worth more to you than the price that you have to pay, and therefore every time we buy something, we will be generating some consumer surplus. In this article called Sources of Consumer Surplus, I tried to provide a survey of a whole bunch of different items that I've bought over time. These are intended to be relatively low price items, and the idea here is that we can think of some really concrete examples of when market transactions have delivered some meaningful consumer surplus. What I'd like you to think about now, maybe on a single slide, or just think about this, can you present a good example of a single item that has given you a large amount of consumer surplus? Maybe if you read the article that I did and use that as a starting point, can you think of some examples of where you've generated some consumer surplus, and those ideas might be useful to share with a wider audience so that they can also benefit from consumer surplus?